This is your Nature Journal Educators Forum. And what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be talking about sort of why nature journaling. What can we understand about it and the process ourselves to help us get more out of that? How can we share that with our students to help them intrinsically kind of appreciate doing this? It's going to be a whole heck of a lot of fun. Before I get started, I would like to introduce the team that is running this. I'm John Muir-Laws. I'm a nature journal educator and science communicator from California. And this here is Billy Joe Reed. Billy Joe, do you want to give a little introduction to yourself as co-host?
Yeah. So I am Billy Joe Reed, as most of you know. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I work in outdoor education for a school board up here. And I've been part of this community now for going on a year and a half, which is really exciting.
Right. And co-host Vea Moore. Would you like to say hello? Also, any announcements about kind of events relevant to nature journal educators coming up in our community?
Absolutely. So some of the things coming up today are we have Marley Piper at 6 o'clock with the Nature Journal show, nature journaling on a cliff in Costa Rica, if you like extreme nature journaling. Tomorrow we have 8 o'clock Pencil Miles and Chill, and then 10 o'clock with Jack. I believe it is hatching and cross hatching, if I'm not mistaken, and then stippling the following week. We also have events with Melinda both tonight and tomorrow. I know that one of them involves the Santa Cruz Library. So I'm going to be posting the link to the community calendar in a second. Saturday morning, Brian Higginbotham with the Great Valley Nature Journal Club, 8 o'clock. I don't know the theme. 1 o'clock with me, if anybody's interested in the traveling journal for climate change stories, and then 3 o'clock with Pencil Miles and Chill. Also, we have Melinda Nakagawa again on Sunday with the Monterey Bay Nature Journal Club, and then Marley in the afternoon with a live show. And I think that's all I know for now, but I will be posting the community calendar events in the chat. So thank you.
Do we have any other writing workshop Wednesdays with Rebecca?
We do. Yeah, next week we have one. It's going to be a very special thing, but I'll let Rebecca talk about that because she's here.
Hey, Rebecca, we're going to allow you to talk about it. Oh, actually, first, before we do that, just say hi and say who you are.
My name is Ivea Moore. I am a nature journaler and habitat restorationist from San Francisco, sometimes educator, and I'm here to help. Thank you.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Rebecca. I'm a nature journaler and I lead Writing Workshop Wednesdays for anybody who doesn't know. And yeah, just briefly, next week's topic I'm excited about. It reminds me a lot of the recent session that we had about nature journaling for resilience and yeah. So there's this book that I just came out that I'm a part of. It's called The Ripple of Words, and it's from this program called the Cystic Fibrosis Singspire program, which is where we get singing lessons. So this is a part of myself I don't usually talk about, but I think you know, when I talk about writing and nature journaling and you finding your own voice, you know, we bring all parts of ourselves to our nature journaling. And so this is it's a collection of letters that we wrote that's basically the words that we need to hear that you know, when we feel isolated. And and my singing teacher is who started this whole program is going to be there as a special guest. So I'll share some of the letters in this book, including my own. And then we'll get the chance to write our own letters, more of a nature theme, you know, because we've been talking about how we can feel isolated through all this kind of work, and, you know, dealing with the difficult aspects of connecting to nature. So yeah, that'll be next week for the writing workshop.
That's really exciting. Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm now going to take a look at our a community gallery here. If you've got other announcements that are relevant to the Nature Journal educator community, just raise your paw and we will spotlight you, bring you into this conversation. And not seeing that, we are, let's talk about, let's talk a little bit about nature journaling, because something that has really interested me is that I have brought nature journaling to some schools where I thought that it was going to be a real challenge. I was once trying to bring nature journaling up to a continuation school over on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada, tucked up against the mountains, and everybody had told me, like, these kids, these are tough kids, these are those kind of kids. And what happened is that the kids took a look at this nature journaling activity, kind of did a little assessment of it. Actually, before we even started the class, they were kind of going through all the journals. And by the time we started, they were all in, and they were really excited about doing this. And the people who are running this program kind of kept poking their heads in just to try to, like, because they knew they'd have to kind of get in there and correct people's behavior. But everybody was, they were like, oh, this is actually really useful. Okay, so how do we do this? And it was an amazing session. But they kind of got the authenticity of it. I think that we're kind of bringing something to the table that is really, really useful. And if people are driven by internal motivation rather than an external reward, like, we're going to give you a really, you want to get a good grade on this, versus like, I want to do this because of this and this and this and this, because I know that's going to help me. The way our brain wraps around it is totally different. There's really interesting research, actually, even in looking at on tasks that you're trying to get people to do that don't require any thinking, and where you're just, like, you know, putting widgets in. It turns out that the more that you pay people, the more widgets they will attach. However, when you are doing activities that require thinking, when we give an extrinsic reward, so that is a, you know, the grade or the money and these sorts of things, that the people who are motivated by that actually perform not as well as people who have an intrinsic motivation. So if you, for instance, give people a difficult puzzle to solve, in this study, it was the candle problem. And so here's the candle problem. What they do is they give people a box of matches and a couple of thumbtacks and a candle, and they challenge the person to attach the candle to the wall in a way that the candle can be lit. That you have a lit candle that is attached to the wall that will not burn the wall, and that the melting candle will not be able to drip wax on the table. And don't give away the answer if you have heard of the candle problem before. But with some people, they said, like, this is this fun kind of brain challenge. It's a puzzle. See what you can do. You compare those people their time with the people who, like, if you finish this within 3 minutes, we're going to give you $50. And if it's within 5 minutes, you get $20. And within 7 minutes, you get $2, right? So when there's that financial reward in there, people's ability to do the candle problem collapses. And the candle problem is kind of fun. You kind of mess around with it a little bit, you'll figure it out. But don't look it up. Don't look it up online. Oh no. Don't look up the candle problem. No. Fingers off the keyboard, right? And so how can we get that same kind of intrinsic motivation going for us? Let's, in just a moment, we're going to do something with our keyboards. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask everybody to just sort of brainstorm for a little bit. We're going to give everybody 1 minute to think about what are reasons to do nature journaling. And we're going to write that into the chat, but you're not going to hit send. And what we're going to do is at the end of the 1 minute, we're all going to hit send, and boom, 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 all those things will appear at the same time. That way your ideas aren't colored and tinted by the cool ideas that other people are giving in, and theirs aren't either. You ready? So let's open up the chat, and I'm going to ask everybody to write that right now. But don't hit send yet. I'll let you know in 1 minute. Here we go. You ready? All right. On your mark, get set, and go. All right, everybody, let's take a moment. I'm going to ask everybody to take a moment and take a look down there. And just, we're going to take a moment and read through some of these. And choose one that either you said or somebody else said that you find particularly interesting for us to kind of unpack in a little discussion. Hey, just to get us started off here, Connie Hamilton, do you feel comfortable talking to us a little bit about the idea of sort of meditation and kind of the calming states in the mind? That is, don't mean to put you on the spot, but hey, I want to put you on the spot because I like your idea. And let's spotlight you, and here we go. Oops, we have to allow you to unmute. I didn't push the right button. So don't worry, it's not you, it's us. We need to push the right button in order to allow you to unmute. But I think I might have to take you off the spotlight. Then I can ask to, there we are, ask to unmute. And now see if you can unmute yourself. Oops. Yeah, there we go. Great.
There we
go. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about that. That's kind of an interesting idea. Could you unpack that for us a little bit more and let us know what you're thinking when you wrote that?
Okay. I find when I go out and pick a spot, pick a place, pick an environment, and begin making the observations, and particularly if I'm making observations and doing some recording, sometimes it happens with picture taking as well, but you get lost in the behaviors, the change in design of landscape, colors changing of landscape. My most recent was setting kayaks in at about a little after 7 in the morning on the Wekiva River. Now, I'm in Florida, so we're still have the ability to be outside. But it was a cool morning and the sun is coming up. And with the sun coming up and it getting warmer, but yet the cold of the surroundings, you get all this misty fog just coming up off the river. It's like you're going into some spatial place. It's like you're not even connected when you can intake that. I mean, I can get that without the fog, but it certainly worked that day. And you just begin to be mesmerized by the parts and pieces, what you can see, what you can hear, because quite often I find birds very elusive. I know they're there, I can hear that they're there, I hear their songs, you see quips of them moving. So that's sight and hearing, no tasting.
Yeah, not
But
yeah.
yeah, and
Um,
not a lot of touching, particularly if you're in a kayak, but a lot of visual. But you just get lost in what is there in your and the surroundings,
mhm.
and so much of it's new. It's not what you see in your work environment, your school environment, your house environment, your shopping environment. Um, it takes you to a place that's relatively new and exciting. And my son goes scuba diving and has a rather high-paced job, all involved, a lot of coming at you stuff. But he loves to go scuba diving and be under the water, and where kind of you just go into Zen and everything is shut off.
Mhm,
All
mhm.
those things coming at you, all those noises, all those interruptions, all those distractions. And I find that also I can find my place in nature doing the same thing. And therefore it takes it to be a very Zen and meditative
Mhm, mhm.
experience. And anything that goes along those lines where it changes your body physiology in the meditation and the zenning, or even the full appreciation and gratitude of what you're seeing and looking at, the awe of it is a very much a contribution to individual health. And so it's just so much that's wrapped into it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so much going on with it. I'm kind of highlight what you're sort of saying there about sort of the meditativeness of it, the stillness of it. Laura Markham was also mentioning it as sort of a mindfulness practice. Is it okay if I bring
Mhm.
you in on this, Laura? Um, the so maybe kind of unpack that mindfulness bit for us a little bit.
So besides the connecting to the environment, I mean, it's about also listening within yourself and feeling and just kind of noticing things and noticing how you can notice non-judgmentally the world around you, but you can also notice yourself responding. That's actually the assignment I gave my students this week, is to just go outside for 10 minutes. And because it's really cold, not as cold as it is with Billy Joe, but it's cold. And just to notice how their body responds to being out around nature. They don't have to take any notes. They don't have to do anything. So, I mean, in that respect, it's not quite nature journaling, but it's just that being in nature. And they're going to do some reading on the positive effects of nature on children. So, and people in general, but we mostly focus on children. So, but the thing is just to notice and to not necessarily, not categorize, not to just be. And you don't have to say it's a good or a bad, but in general, what the research has shown is that most people, do have that lowering of their heart rate. They have their, just kind of the very color of green actually affects people. And being around, we're going to try it without any leaves. So we're going to try that, but just how does it can help slow you down. And their main thing is they're not going to bring their phones outside. So
Yeah,
no phones.
Yeah, there are lots of schools are now incorporating mindfulness as part of their practices. I once kind of looked at as a fringe hippie thing. Mindfulness and meditation and some of the sort of the flow states you can kind of be in the presence of nature. Looking in and intentionally paying attention to yourself as part of the situation. These used to feel like, yeah, fringe hippie stuff, but meditation is now taught to the special forces and the entire British Army studies meditation as ways of helping them kind of focus and be calm. We're teaching that to kids in schools, and kids who have, you know, opportunities for just doing a few mindful breaths before a test outperform the kids who have been instructed to cram before the test. Interesting. So if you would like to also kind of get in on this point, sort of thoughts or ideas about the meditative aspects of it, or mindfulness aspects of it, let's hear those thoughts now, and then we'll go on to a different aspect of it. Let's bring in Billy Joe. What have you noticed? What have you observed?
Hi. So the same thing, just to kind of go off of what everyone else is saying in terms of mental health. So in a part of our curriculum now, the phys ed curriculum in the health unit, actually mental health is a huge piece that they're starting to see in elementary all the way up to high school. And so even in the last week, because we have been online now for 2 weeks again here in Ontario. And so a lot of the kids are kind of stressing with that and things like that. So I've done a few, not necessarily like direct nature journal, but like aspects of nature journal. When we speak, I challenge them to go outside for their phys ed, but really look at the sort of mindfulness pieces that they can be doing indoors or through a window. So 2s and 3s, I did cloud drawing. So I kind of looked at Beth Ann Burton when she taught us all how to do skyscapedos. And I thought, well, what a wonderful way for grade 2 and 3s to be able to do that. And no matter where you live, you have access to the sky. And so that was a really amazing thing. And now our sky is pretty gray right now because it's a lot of snow. So what I did was I actually did a little slideshow where I was able to bring in pictures of different types of clouds. And what we did is we looked at what do they thought was going on, why they thought the clouds were looking like that, what was, you know, the wonder that was a part of all of that, and then teaching them just different little techniques. And again, I'm not an artist and it didn't really matter, but I got them to sort of do their own interpretation of what and how that they would draw those skies. And so some of them drew like clouds, and then I had this other kid who was like, I think it looks like a crocodile and there looks like a boat. And so instead of drawing the clouds, this student drew the crocodile and the boat, which I thought was so awesome that they were able to sort of, you know, because I didn't give them any limits. I was like, we're doing the sky, but you can do it in any way you want. And so, you know, some of them were like, well, I think it's a dragon. I see a dragon in the clouds. And I'm like, great. And so some of them would draw, you know, the puffy clouds. And again, some of them were actually drawing dragons. And so I thought that was a really beautiful way for them to sort of, we call them brain breaks, you know, taking some time away from the screen and, you know, being able to sort of do that. And it's again, with the teachers as well, giving their students time to be able to do that. With the 4s and 5s, they're a little bit older, so their writing skills were better. We did one called kind of Write It Out. So probably inspired a little bit by Rebecca as well. And so I got them to sort of use emojis or sort of sketchnoting, or they could use words, and being able to look at how they were feeling in that moment, right? And to be really honest and to not shy away and sort of put on that brave face, but to really be honest with sort of how they were feeling. And some of them were really amazing at sharing just how they were feeling without being online, how they were feeling really scared. And I had no prompt except, how are you feeling right now, and being honest, right? And so, are you tired or you're hungry? But I didn't bring anything up about what's going on in the world, and just sort of let that, if it needed to come out, come out. And it came out in some classes and it didn't in others, and that's okay. Then I would give them the challenge of, okay, in a second, I want you to go find a window or a door. I want you to spend a little time looking outside, touch the cold window. How does that make you feel? Come back. And then we did go hug something. So if you have a human in your house, go give a hug. If you've got a stuffy, a pet, a pillow, hug yourself, whatever it is, and understanding that there's that security and that you feel good. And then I played some different music for them. So I played the Jaws theme song. And then watching all of their expressions was pretty hilarious. Then we did Uptown Funk. So I just had to play like the first couple bars and they all knew Bruno Mars's Uptown Funk. And then we played nature sounds. And so on each of those, I got them to identify how those sounds made them feel. And so it was an entire 40 minutes of just really connecting with that sort of mental health piece. And then we challenged them to go out for a walk through the neighborhood with their families, write down how they were feeling before the hike, and then to do the same thing when they got back from the hike, and then they were to share that on the next phys ed class with their teacher. So again, taking nature journaling and you know, not always having, sometimes it's just okay to do the bits and pieces, I think, if it makes the sense, because you're still nature journaling, you're just not maybe going through all of those pieces, but really sort of bringing that mental health piece into it, I just thought was really awesome. And those are the pieces that I really like. And then the wonder is my favorite. So if we can give kids permission to just think without looking for the right answer, and I love watching them try to think of the right answer and me telling them that I don't want the right answer, that I just want them to think. And when you finally get that look of them releasing that pressure of having to know the right answer and then watching the floodgates of their thoughts open is one of my favorite things. So if someone said to me, Billy Joe, what is your favorite part of nature journaling? It's the I wonder. That is when I think like just, it's just so magical to let them just sort of let that go and to really just expand on like, what are you thinking, right? Like, what are your thoughts based on what you have? And so to me, those are the really big key parts that I pull away from nature journaling.
That's really interesting. You know, when they people who kind of broken down the components of intrinsic motivation, one system of that, they identified three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And just sort of tying into the autonomy piece on that, where you're able to kind of do something on your own terms. You're giving room for those students to find the crocodile in the sky and follow the crocodile.
Yeah.
You're also giving people permission to explore their own thoughts, their own ideas about something, giving them the room to sort of play with those, with answering questions without worrying about the right answer.
Yeah, I want them to not have that pressure. And
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I've really taken away from you in the last year and a half is to stop looking for the right answer to a question, but put a question out and look for the possibilities. And I find it's so much more authentic. And I would say like that's a huge takeaway that I've had from listening to you and all of your lessons is really just listening to what is being said and just letting it sort of be there. Because I think you're right. And sometimes when we give those right answers, we can sometimes, it depends. Sometimes it can expand it,
Yep.
and sometimes it can shut it down. And I think really knowing when it's okay to give the right answer, to that right answer will actually help us move forward in our thinking, and when that right answer will shut that conversation down. And so that I think is like, as an educator, no matter where you're educating, is really like, it's a play, right? Like trying to figure out when the best time is to do that. But I really love the freedom of thought. And I'm a question asker. So I think that I like giving kiddos time to do that as well, and to honor what they have to say and giving them the space and the freedom to do that. So I just love listening to it. Maybe it's selfish on my part. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, that, you know, as an educator or as a parent, this whole idea of I want to, and it's sort of embedding into your journaling process, this idea of freedom of thought. That's just so liberating. Yeah, this nature journal really is a place where we can think divergently and explore ideas. And sometimes we're kind of narrowing in, but sometimes you want to, you know, a big part of the process can also be to generate possibilities.
And I think
And
too is, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no, but just sort of, and that's a fundamental part of scientific investigation and things, but it's in the kind of spoon-fed science lab where we're going to be doing an experiment with paramecium today, adding these different chemicals to the water that they're in, and then seeing how they respond. And we're going to be filling it into this data table. And here are the things that we're looking for. That is, you're not there. We try to control the thought and that process, as opposed to letting people think about, what are you interested in, and then how do you go about figuring those sorts of things out. I absolutely agree with you. This is
because we already know the answers on those things, right? Like we already know the answer. We already know how the paramecium is going to react. So what are we teaching them, right? Like you're teaching them just how to do the experiment. But I think also when you give that freedom of thought, it builds confidence. And so I think, like, to Rebecca, and I think to writing, and writing is always something that's been very fearful for me. It's not my happy place. But I think the more that you give yourself confidence for that free thought, I feel like creativity comes along with that as well. And then you are then more open to poetry writing or writing a short story or doing those things because you've had practice with that free thought of just sort of letting those creative juices going, instead of being like, I'm going to be marked on this poorly. I'm not a very good writer. I don't know my grammar very well. I'm a terrible speller, et cetera, et cetera. And just being like, who cares? Who cares, right? Like, I'm having a great time and I've got stuff to say. It might not sound pretty, but I've got great things to say. And being able to express that, I think is such a great thing. So
and so much of that comes from that autonomy that you are given. So the Nature Journal is what we are putting the pen in your hand, and let things come out from there. I'd love to bring Aisha in on this conversation, if I could. And I was wondering about your thoughts about this, where this is taking your thinking, and what you'd like to, how you might want to sort of expand or diverge from this conversation.
Thank you. What ended up coming to mind while listening just for the last few minutes was about the questions piece. And I found myself thinking that maybe I would start making it more explicit to my nature journalers that we were not going to rush back later and Google everything, because we're in a very different world of education now, right? And I've had students be like, why don't we just Google the answer? So I thought, bringing in the metacognition piece and just sort of saying, we're not going to Google this. I encourage you not to Google this, depending on their age group. And that we're building the skill of asking questions. This is something we're doing rather than looking for answers immediately. And then also just thinking as a scientific process, encouraging the group to try and think about, or maybe this because it's something I really like to do, or when I read science books now, it's like, well, how would one figure out the answer? What would it take, right? How do scientists do these studies to figure it out? So I would maybe toss that in with the group while we were doing I Wonder, or and after reflection or something while we were sharing questions.
I like that idea of, when you're journaling and you're investigating these things, a big part of the journaling is you're looking at the phenomenon and you're documenting stuff about it, and that's getting you to ask questions, and you're looking back at the phenomenon. You're unpacking the process behind knowledge acquisition, rather than just kind of, I'm going to read all the stuff in the book. It's the difference between somebody who picks up a journal article and flips to the methods section versus the person who reads the abstract and the conclusion, right? You're inviting people to be in there in the methods to look at the how behind something. And that's also self-empowering, because instead of knowledge coming from the book, right, that's where information comes from. Well, all the information in that book came from somebody just like you sitting on a stump and looking really hard. The other thing that you mentioned, you talked about building skills. So in the sort of the triad of intrinsic motivation, of mastery, autonomy, and purpose, the idea of mastery, you're getting better at things, you're building skills. So baked into nature journaling is mastery of these skills.
Yeah, and I noticed somebody else had mentioned that also as one of their motivations to nature journal, somebody else in that group.
Mentioned the skill building.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So if we're trying to say to somebody like, hey, why is this relevant for me? I'm going to be thinking about my career track and these sort of things. What skills am I developing here that are going to be really relevant in that? Oops, sorry, Clark, you were unmuted and I just muted you. I want to keep, if I could keep you, Aisha, here, and also bring Clark in on this.
There we go. It was Clark. I knew it was somebody with a C. Yeah. And it seems like, these are transferable skills, as they say, or cross-cutting skills, the skills of thinking, observing, critical thinking, which goes into questions, right? You need that no matter what you're doing. I find that just even going back to the science methodology, sometimes I do it because I tend to take facts also, just like, oh, okay, that's how a bird does that. It wasn't until I started going, I wonder how they figured that out, that I realized I could let in some doubt. Like, this was just, again, theories that scientists are checking, and it may all get overturned in another 5, 10, 20 years. And that built my own critical thinking skills by looking into methodology or getting curious about that. Anyway, Clark. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just introduced journaling on Monday to my students, and the card that I led with was the idea that observation and curiosity are skills that you can really cultivate. And I teach in a high-end, high-power private school, and these are very type A personalities. And I was really pleased with how well that resonated with them. I could have gone for all sorts of personal angles about connection to nature that mean a lot to me, but I think I'll let that come with time, and they'll just absorb that from my enthusiasm, rather than that being the thing that I verbalized to them right from the beginning. So I sold them on the idea that, the ability, there's that Beatles education clip introducing I Wonder, I Notice, I Wonder, it reminds me of, and the lead uses Sherlock Holmes, that Sherlock Holmes said, I don't see more than anybody else, I just train myself to notice. And they absolutely lit up with that quote. But I also want to mention that I found that angle, particularly in my environment, has been very useful in terms of selling it to admin or to my colleagues. That if I get all gushy about connecting to nature and saving the world, people's eyes start to roll. But if I talk about building skill, building these qualities of what we think a really capable student would have, that gets people excited pretty quickly. And so I definitely have a much wider set of motivations and goals than that. But I find that is definitely a winning opening. I did this week. I was really pleased.
That's really cool. I'm so glad that this is off to a roaring start with them. Mm-hmm. The idea that you can get so much better at seeing things. We assume that if I can see, I know how to observe. But when you're out with somebody who is a trained observer, a noticer, right? I've been out hiking with some naturalists, and it seems that, you know, on every hike they go, just by chance, there are these amazing phenomena just bursting out all around them. And so why is it that they're so lucky that that's the case? Well, it's not that they're lucky, it's that they're such good observers that they're noticing these things, and they can kind of help pull the group's attention over to it. And the, I remember being out with a naturalist, David Lucas, in the field, and we're walking through this field of yarrow, and he looks down and he spots that here's a crab spider, a white camouflage crab spider on the top of this yarrow. And how did he notice it? Well, he saw the fly that it was holding that was not flying away. And he said, yeah, and look over there, that butterfly hasn't moved, since we came out in this field. I'll bet there's going to be another one there. We walked over there, there's another crab spider holding on to this butterfly on top of the flower. So it's just that, it's some people's, they've trained themselves to notice. That's huge.
I told one of the things I did tell them was that the first time I went on a Audubon walk with birders, it was like these people had different eyes than I did. They heard with different ears than I did. They lived in a world that was color, and mine was still stuck in black and white. And that's about as gushy as I got with them. But at that point, they were hooked. They were ready for that.
Yeah, I just sort of parallel story. I was out in Montana, cross-country skiing with a woman who was a wolf researcher and tracker. She had all these wolves radio collared, and she'd kind of follow them around and kind of decipher the stories of these wolf attacks on elk by looking at tracks in the snow. And she's walking along like, oh, here's coyote tracks. And these were tracks that were covered with the snow that had fallen the night before. So there's these little depressions. And she says, like, these are coyote tracks. And I said, well, how do you know? Like, there are some people out there who just make stuff up. They'll see some tracks and they'll pretend to be like the sage in the woods. I said, how do you know that? She had me look at, from this track to this track, this is a walking gait. So that means that its shoulders here and its hips are here. So you can actually measure from here to here. That's the size of the body. And, it's out by itself, all these sorts of things. She explained exactly why she knew it was a coyote. And then she's walking along and she said, like, oh, female. Right? I mean, snowed on tracks, and you're going to say that this is a female. So I said, like, wait, hold the phone. How do you know it's female? And she said, well, look over here. And so she took her ski pole and she scraped the snow out of a little spot where it had stopped and peed, and there was blood in the urine. It was in estrus. Right? So, there's observation, and then there's observation 2.0. Yeah, it's absolutely right. It's a skill. It's a skill that we can develop. Yeah. And so, also, and so is visual thinking. Visual thinking is and so the story that I often use that kind of gets a lot of people's attention. So I find this also, people are saying, like, you're teaching kids how to draw nature stuff. Why is this art stuff important? So I'm going to share this little story, this little anecdote with everybody, and feel free to use this when you're kind of making pitches to people. What I tell people about is, like, if you've ever been at one of these meetings where everybody's talking about something, there's all these ideas and they're kind of floating around, and it's like nothing's really crystallizing. And then there's somebody who's just sort of sitting there at the table, listening. And then they reach over and they kind of grab one of the napkins off the middle of the table that they had at lunch. They make a little diagram on the back of the napkin with their Sharpie, and then they hold it up and they say, well, I kind of see it like this. There are these three parts, but these two are where all the connections are. We're all spending all our energy down here. And once there's this picture of it, that crystallizes all these thoughts that had been going out here. You've turned that into a visual symbol of an idea. And a big part of how we think is with these symbols. And that little piece of napkin material then crystallizes the conversation. And so what I tell people is that what's going on is that she is a visual thinker. And anybody could have done that, but you have to be a visual thinker to be able to do it. And if you if you haven't developed the ability to think with images and pictures, then you are at the mercy of somebody else's napkin in every meeting. And the person who controls the napkin controls the meeting. And then it's just mic drop. And everybody thinks like, I want to be a napkin person, right? I want to be the person in charge of the napkin, right? Because you can use the napkin for communication or persuasion. But if you're just looking at, because you can have made that diagram any number of different ways to emphasize different sorts of things and take the conversation in different directions. It was a napkin conversation that I had with my wife that allowed her to make a major change in the direction of her career, that she ended up in something that was much more satisfying and fulfilling for her. But because I turned our conversation into a diagram, and then as she was talking, I was changing the diagram. And so she's like, oh, that's it. But it had to be on that little piece of paper. So I like your sort of skills approach. That's something that resonates with people. Let's, Aisha, do you have any comments on that? Or Clark, or I'm also, okay, then I will.
I would also share. So I had this conversation with a colleague yesterday, and he so what did you do in class today, Mr. Meyer? This is a friend that I've taught with for 25 years. And I said, well, we sketch sticks. And he sort of laughed and you're getting paid for that. And I said, no, actually what we did was we spent an hour cultivating our skills of curiosity and observation, which the rest of you are doing the best you can to beat out of them. So I'm the most valuable person here. Thank you very much.
Oh, another mic drop.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's check in. I'm going to look at the gallery. Does anybody want in on this? Let's talk skills. Let's talk skill development. What skills are we kind of developing here by
Kate had her hand up. I don't know, but then you took it down. I don't know if you were, but I did see Kate's hand up.
Okay. Kate, do you want in on this?
I'm not sure if you can hear me. My husband is doing yard work. Okay, awesome. So yeah, we had mold on our driveway. We're slipping and falling. No, I just really like the skills thing because I'm also in a really high functioning area, and I also am personally been trained to be very always be productive. What are you trying to do? Just these very high level. A lot of my friends went to Ivy League colleges, that kind of level of expectation. And then I'm over here. I've always just been this. Oh, you're, Kate, she's this artist and she writes some poetry and, she teaches some kids and, people are getting books published and, winning all these awards. And I just really appreciate, and so, going and doing nature journaling, it's funny because some of these very highly productive individuals, they get it on this different level of than me just I'm going to paint some pictures of mermaids. They're like, oh, you're going out and you're observing scientific phenomenon. You can use it for this, and you can use it for this sort of advocacy work, and you can do it for these sort of things. And so I actually just created this set of infographics about this natural disaster that we're dealing with right here in Hawaii, where there were 20,000 gallons of fuel spilled into an aquifer, and so I have been trying to figure out how to communicate that this is happening and this is an ongoing fear, because there's 100 million gallons of fuel that have been stored over, it's only 100 feet above one of the natural aquifers where we get a lot of our water. And so on this island, and it's been polluted now it's by the Navy. And so they just agreed to abide by the Department of Health's order to drain the tanks. So that's a really huge win. But I think it's a lot of it is because there is this big public outcry and a lot of pressure to create that sort of change. And so I have been able to use my art a little in order to support this sort of mission. And so I created, some artwork that was very more the emotional side of things. Just the message of you are worth protecting, because the message from the Navy was just like, oh, we have to protect national security. And so we basically have to sacrifice the health of women and children and babies and pets and everyone in order to, because 5,000 people have reported to hospitals and reported symptoms because of drinking tainted water, and they're saying this is acceptable. And so trying to say this is not acceptable. And so being able to lean on my experience of observing the mountains, and so being able to draw the mountains and trying to be able to draw some of these sort of things and communicate this in a stylistic way. And then I'm working on a set of infographics to try to explain the timeline and all these sort of things, because it's very word heavy and very detail heavy. And so trying to, how do I communicate this in a very visual way, being the napkin, how do I be the napkin person here? And how do I explain this and say, hey, our immediate environment, health of the environment. And because we're worried too that because the aquifers connect to the ocean, I mean, we're a very small island, it's not nothing, none of this is very far away, and what's that going to mean for our coral reefs? What's that going to mean for our climate resiliency? What are we looking at long term? Even if we are able to rely on some other aquifers on the island that are currently untouched, but this is, who knows what this giant underground network looks like of fresh water. And so I've been trying to figure out different ways of demonstrating that and showing that. And and it's so much harder right now, because I had all these plans about being able to go to schools and go to different communities to be able to work with classrooms, but we got this COVID outbreak, and so trying to find ways to still communicate. So wow, how did I got into that? Obviously because it's something that is going on, but
absolutely relevant.
Yeah. And so it has this sort of really direct connection for me right now. And I see in a very real way, hey, all of these sort of floaty, oh, you're just this creative person. Okay, this has real value right now. And it helps remind me okay, yeah, this is why I'm doing, this is why I'm developing these skills, is because these sort of skills and abilities to communicate in these different ways are also important. In addition to a very scientific, reasonable, being able, I'm not the one who's going to be arguing, in the contested case hearing with all this data. I'm going to be the one, working with people and showing them why they should care about this issue and why is it important. And
And so you're pointing out that this sort of developing this visual skill set is something that is critical for communication or persuasion. And in whatever it is that you're going to be doing, in whatever career you choose, it doesn't matter if you're choosing to be a natural scientist or not, right? You're probably going to be in a position where you are trying to communicate with other people. And if you can turn that into to the visual story, you're going to be able to get your ideas across much more quickly and much more clearly. So that's a great example of being a napkin person and putting that napkin to use. Has anybody else sort of seen examples of napkin moments that you could share? Let's see. Or other thoughts about skills. Another thing that while we're thinking about that, just wanted to also sort of put another piece out there. The idea of, very often I have a hard time learning something if I don't see its relevance to what is going on in my world, in my life. I don't see myself really using that. My brain kind of goes like, huh, I that's nice, but I'm probably going to forget that. But if I can kind of, if I can see myself, oh, I could see myself, finding a way of actually using that, out in the field. All of a sudden I'm leaning into this. Like because I've been nature journaling, I've been, looking into cosine tables for figuring out things about, angles and the sun and latitude. And when I was taught cosine stuff in school, there was no context that made me care at all. And but now I'm doing all this self-teaching because I want to kind of geek out on these things. So sometimes you can kind of, the process of journaling can be a motivation for learning other things. It makes me really kind of, want to get, because I find myself out in the field and like, how far away are those ducks? Then I realized like, wow, I'm pretty bad at estimating distances. And so, how many meters tall is that fence? 3? Huh. I was trying to estimate the height of the nest of a toucan in a tree. And I was thinking, the number of meters that it was up in the tree, I got a number that's much higher than another person that I was with. And they realized like, who's right here? And it made me kind of go back and kind of geek out and, and start measuring things again. And I realized that I was overestimating. I was thinking that I was making my meters too small. And meters matter. But I don't think I would have been doing that if I hadn't been nature journaling. Are there any other sorts of skills or?
I see Chris raising her hand.
Oh, hey, Chris. I'm going to. Oops, sorry. I just. There we go.
Okay. This is a small example, but in the 70s, my students in Big Bear, 6th graders, noticed from drawing pictures, et cetera, and around the school, that things near the road were dying off on both sides of the road in the areas where we had more snow. And so we brainstormed what it might be and watched, through the year. And the kids realized they were using salt to melt the snow when we had storms. And so I said, well, what could we use besides that? And the kids all drew pictures of things they visualized. I mean, they visualized snow blowers with flamethrowers and all kinds of strange things that were very unrelated, but we put them up during an open house. Yeah, we put them up during an open house and invited the transportation manager to come and see these things. And they eventually changed it to gravel, and the kids. So it's very empowering if they can use those skills to make a change, even on that level.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. It was because visual. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to bring Aisha back in on this. Aisha, good to see you. So yeah, Chris was just talking about how, training kids how to make infographics of, there's a problem. These plants are dying, and solve that. What are some solutions to that? In the next generation science standards, that's a big focus of what they're asking us to do. What you're doing is what the NGSS is asking us to do with engineering solutions to problems. So they think about it as sort of on the science side, you've got a question, on the engineering side, you've got a problem in search of a solution. And you can bring a lot of the same tools and strategies to bear on both of those. So the engineering practices were applauding that.
Right. The craziest drawings of impossible solutions were absolutely what grabbed people's attention, you know, even if they weren't possible, but made them start thinking about what was possible. We had another assignment because smog came up. This was in Big Bear Lake. Smog came up and ran over the dam and killed the trees that were the lowest around the lake. And we had a forestry guy come in and talk to the kids, and they saw pictures visually of what was happening and drew pictures of that. And kids were coming up with solutions like a great big sheet of something up by the dam, you know, some big shield that would keep it from coming into the valley. You know, they had all kinds of things like this. And it sparked their imagination, even though they couldn't come up with a decision of, you know, what would work. But at least they were aware of the problem. Yeah.
I like that.
So, yeah.
Aisha.
Hey, I was going to talk about something else, but Chris's last example reminded me of how much fun we had during a unit on migration, where I don't know where I was going anymore, but the students, I noticed, suddenly got so excited by the transmitters on the birds and the technology, and they had so many questions that I just stopped everything, gave everybody a piece of paper and said, you design what you think would work. And keep in mind, you know, the questions you asked me, but how it's going to be powered. I guess that was part of the questions they asked. And it was great. I actually turned that into a structured part of my unit the next year. I'm like, dedicated class time to this. Of course, the next group was less interested, but that's how it goes with fifth graders. It's just, or fourth graders, you don't know. The reason I wanted to hop on was another thought that came to mind, going back to skills and some of the chats and stuff. Wanted to share something. A Canadian teacher, actually, who was at our school for a few years, but went back to Toronto. Anyway, an idea he brought back with him that I was trying to incorporate was self-assessment by students. And just as Jack was talking about the cosigns, I started again remembering that one of the wonderful things about nature journaling is, you know, everybody can bring a different skill to it. It might be the numbers, it might be the pictures, it might be the words, and they can work on the other pieces. And then I was thinking, well, the self-assessments we were doing for other topics, how would it apply here? And students could assess themselves, like what was their strength, where they were going to grow. And these are things we've talked about in the past. And it could include, you know, their observation skills, where they felt they were, their wondering, their expertise at asking questions. And then, you know, after a number of weeks of nature journaling, if this is a regular session, come back and simply assess themselves again. I started doing that with, I think, a fifth grade on up, and just giving them simple rankings, no judgment on my part. You don't have to show anybody else. Here's the scale. Just think about it. Sometimes they were like, we don't even understand what you're asking. I'm like, that's okay. You know, you can just make a note. I don't understand what you're asking. Because then when we came back to it 10 weeks later, they're like, I'm really good at this now, you know, or yeah, I was only a 3 and I didn't make it to 10, but I sure made it to a 5 on this. So that was something very interesting. This teacher, Michael James, shared, and a skill I was trying to develop myself is how to design self-assessments. So I just wanted to throw that out to the group as something somebody might want to incorporate. Yeah, and it seems like that's sort of a newer thing happening in education, and it seemed like he had really amazing training in Canada.
So well, those Canadians out there.
Canadians.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole problem of just sort of, you know, with Toronto, you know, sucking our best minds away from this.
Yeah, I don't know why he wanted to go back, but he's busy taking them out into the snow. And he's like, I'm going to take all your ideas with me to Toronto. And I was like, I'd rather you stayed here, but okay.
But let's actually pause on this idea of self-assessment, because I think this is really, really interesting. Because this is something that human beings are terrible at. We're terrible at assessment. If people are kind of want to kind of geek out on this a little bit further, I want to encourage everybody to just do a little bit of research on what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is where when we don't have real expertise in something, we tend to think we're really good at it. But we don't have, you know, and sort of people who are the worst at something have the highest sort of overestimation of their ability at this. I kind of had this, you know, kind of wonderful, the Dunning-Kruger moment. I was studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and thought that I'm really getting this, like really, really getting this. If you had asked me kind of, you know, what is your assessment of sort of where do you stand in sort of the range of skills, this being the highest over here, I would have put myself sort of somewhere over here. I now understand that I was way, 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 way over here. But I just didn't understand the size of the cloth. So Dunning-Kruger is not this has been misinterpreted in the general public as that that stupid people don't know how stupid they are. This is a total misunderstanding of the Dunning-Kruger research. What it is that if you've ever heard somebody at a party kind of waxing poetic about something that is really your personal area of deep, deep, deep expertise, and you realize this person just has no idea what they're talking about, that's also you when you're talking about all the things that are not your deep, deep, deep area of expertise, right? So we're all that guy, right? But the idea of getting better at self-assessment is really important. You can't really do that without metacognition, without being able to get ideas out of your head and putting them down on paper. And also the kind of reflection that goes on when you have to do that. You know, people who keep a diary are more emotionally intelligent than people who don't. So if they want to sort of raise people's emotional intelligence in a group, you get those people starting to keep a diary, and their ability to kind of have insight on their own sorts of things goes way, way, way up. But a big part of that is externalizing your thinking. So we're training people through journaling how to externalize their thinking. We're giving them critical tools for better metacognition to understand and to self-assess. So the journal, not just as a place, now I want you to write about how good you are at this, but for you to sort of kind of drop into, you know, the processes or the phenomenon itself. You know, it's where you do your work on it, but it's also where you can reflect on how well you do that work. So having the journal is training us to do better self-assessment. I think that's huge. That got circled on my notes here with an arrow pointing to it.
An arrow?
It got a circle and an arrow.
A shaded arrow? A curvy arrow?
Shading it now.
I always love your arrows in your journaling. Actually, I spend a lot of time practicing arrow drawing. It's a place I'm trying to improve my own skill set.
Yeah, you know, also just sort of with self-assessment, sometimes when you get an idea, kind of once you put it down on paper, you kind of go like, oh, not so much. Okay, that wasn't one of my best ideas. But when it's sitting inside your head, it feels great. You know, you can sometimes catch yourself saying something, you know, and it's partway out of your mouth, and you go like, oh, never mind. Actually, that's not going to work. But when it was sitting inside your electric meat, it sounded like such a good idea. So that's another power of that, of journaling. Interesting. we are going to be closing out this meeting in just a moment, because I see we've gone 15 minutes over, but I want to thank everybody for participating in this. Before we do, are there any other thoughts, comments, or ideas that you've got in your head that we want to share with this community? And also realize that you talking about it is going to help you, it's going to help you save your best ideas. So that's, I'm just encouraging people to externalize their thinking here. Hey, Linda, thank you for joining us.
Hey, hello there. How are you?
Doing really, really well.
It's great to be here today. I have two things to share. One is that I did my very first nature journaling group yesterday at the library. So, and I've been trying to start it for a long time between snow and this and that, finally, and I have 4 students with 4 more that want to come next time. So I just a little side share that something I've always wanted to do is happening. So there you go. So I want to go back to chat about the infographic with solutions to problems and the crazy that can come out of it and whatever. The first thing I want to say is that we really do need all hands on deck, even sharing this crazy. And in my previous life, my husband and I have done a lot of marketing for the cause of good things. And sometimes in the crazy comments would be the thing that would share something that would be seemingly impossible, but make it like kind of doable and give somebody a smile and maybe crack their resistance open. So it doesn't have to be something that anybody's ever going to do. Like one of the things was don't top your trees in your yard. That's one of the things that when we were asked to get people to understand not to do. So we had a picture of one of the statues downtown with the head chopped off of it. And it would be a lot of crazy things. And so, and I think that the kind of humor is usually about 10 or 11 or 12-year-old kids, because they're willing to say something kind of offensive, crazy, and seemingly impossible, but it cracks you up in your humor part. And sometimes that's the beginning of a solution. And sometimes long ago, lots of our science fiction people had a lot of solutions that would never have been thought of. And so I think that but my feeling is all hands on deck and all the creativity is needed. And some of it might be compost for the future. Some of it might be something that you can use in a different way that you'd imagined or whatever. So, and so I'm empowering all of you teachers out there to be even more resilient and accept the wild and find a place for it. So there you go.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. That's really fun. That's really fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This is like a couple of things that came up today have been so helpful for me to be just better at whatever I'm even thinking to do myself, even like washing my dishes, it builds in so many ways. So thank you.
Yeah. That's what I find about these educator forums. The kind of the different ideas that we share are really, really powerful in helping us take this to the next level.
They are. And we all are mixing together with all these different points of views. And from the beginning of a session to the end of the session, I mean, I think that we're all a little bit different human beings than we started like an hour and a half ago. So there you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's good.
So what we're going to be doing in just a moment, we're going to be wrapping up our meeting here. I want to thank all of you for being here. I would also like to send out as a special thanks to Billy Joe Reed and Evea Moore, our co-hosts, for helping us wrangle this and other sessions. So many good ideas here, like the whole kind of metacognition, self-assessment part, like that was in my head kind of attached to a different conversation But once it's sort of brought out here kind of in daylighted, like, of course, like that's this critical part of this conversation. And it's really exciting to be here with all of you as we're sort of helping us sort of mold and articulate this to the best that we can do. So thank you all very much. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care, be safe. In a lot of places, we've got the Omicron variant of COVID spiking. If that's happening in your neighborhood, hunker down and draw the bones that you put by the window last summer when you found that really interesting carcass, rather than kind of running out and exposing us to other people. The thing about these sort of these spikes is that they come down, and the less we can be out when it's up, that's where that's going to help us all get through this. But be safe, be well, and thank you again. Thank you all so much for being here. Deep gratitude and respect. Bye-bye, everybody.